Welcome back, everybody, to the ROI Online Podcast. And today I'm excited to introduce you to my guest, Dr. Kris Wusterhausen. Dr. Kris is a client and a friend. His clinic is the Resurge Clinic. And Dr. Kris, welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Thank you. Hope everybody's doing well today.
All right, awesome. So, Dr. Kris, the folks that listen to this, they learn things. They deserve to meet you. The folks that I introduce, I'm proud to introduce. And so, give us a little background, please, about your backstory, about how you ended up with the Resurge Clinic and why.
Well, I always say that the Resurge Clinic actually started with one patient, and that was myself. I'm a board-certified family physician. I found myself in my mid-30s, overweight. All of my lab parameters were trending in the wrong direction: blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, that sort of thing. And I realized, I kind of woke up one day and realized that if I kept the same path myself, that I probably would fall into the trend of physicians, which is not that long of a lifespan. So I started looking into different forms of treating patients, more dietary, hormones, of course, and different things. And I actually linked up with a company called Synergenics and trained and worked with them for about 3 years, but then decided that I kind of wanted to put my own spin on it. And so that's where the research basically came from, was just wanting to treat patients in a different way than the traditional medicine typically allows. Looking for those patients that really want to think outside the box on how to get healthy. Not always just a prescription. Sometimes it is a prescription, but not always just a prescription. And just, like I said, thinking outside the box. And so we've evolved with time. We're always adding new things to our practice, but that's kind of where it started at.
You know, it's interesting to me. When we go to the doctor, the insurance company seems to dictate what most general practice physicians can consider as far as a treatment, or even spend the time to investigate what's going on with you. One of our clients, his name is Chris Kresser. He's an author, and he's a functional medicine physician.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day I asked him, what's functional medicine? And I love the way that he put it. Is basically you have all these various doctors. You have a doctor, maybe a dermatologist, maybe you have a internist, maybe you have a cardiologist. But what's missing is that quarterback for
Mm-hmm.
all these folks. They're not talking together. And so whatever one physician may prescribe may be impacting some other aspect that the other physician
Sure.
is. And so what I like about what you do as well is that you conduct these labs. And this really didn't sink into me until, I read those articles about you need to eat more spinach, and spinach does this and this and this. And so for maybe 3 or 4 weeks until we get tired of it, we eat more spinach because we're convinced that's going to help us. But what we're doing
Sure.
is just guessing. And the beautiful thing that you're doing is lab-based data that you can measure over time to see what's effective and what we should do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just, I'm fortunate enough that most of my patients are all looking to do better, which was something I felt like I'd kind of lost in general family practice. Like you were saying, it's so guided by the insurance companies and what you can and can't do. And just the amount of paperwork that a traditional physician goes through on a daily basis dealing with insurances. And so we went to it was a big leap of faith to go to a cash-based practice. Would my customers support it? Would they not support it? And, we've been very blessed on the support that we've received, from the cash paying community, and how they're looking for, that they see the benefit, I guess, in what we do. And that truly means a lot to all of us here.
So when you talk about patients or folks that you're working with both male and female at a certain
Mm-hmm.
point in life, maybe. Give us a really good, clear picture of that, please.
Yeah, so we treat all types, of course, men and women. I think our practice is slightly skewed to women. I think it's about 55-45 the last time we looked at our demographics. And our average age is 35 to 65 is probably our wheelhouse. But we have probably down to as young as 10 or 12 in our practice, up to 80 something years old, maybe actually 90 now, I think is my oldest patient. So, but, it's generally what we consider that middle-aged person who is starting to see some of the negative effects of aging and wanting to possibly slow that process down. When we started doing this, it was called anti-aging, and we realized that there is no such thing as anti-aging. That's why it's become age management medicine, because we're going to age no matter what. The key is aging gracefully, hopefully. And I believe what we do makes people live longer, but I know for sure that it improves their quality of life. And that's what I think most people are really looking for, is quality, maybe even over quantity, but quality as long as we can get it is so important.
So what events trigger someone to start investigating or consider what you're offering, and kind of give us an idea what those therapies or procedures or what exactly it is that you're addressing and how?
Okay. Well, so the trigger is different for everyone, but most of the time it's something is changing in their life, and obviously not usually for the positive. They're maybe feeling more fatigued, or maybe they're noticing that they're gaining weight when they used to not gain weight, or sexual function is a large part of our practice. Maybe their erections aren't as good as they once were, or maybe a female sensitivity isn't what it once was. But generally, it's something in the gamut of just not feeling quite like they used to that brings them into my practice. I mean, we get some patients that are actually doing really well that are just referrals from other people and saying, hey, you need to come in and be part of this practice. And overall, they're doing well, and we just tweak small things. But most of the time, there's something going on in their life that they just don't feel good about. And, depending on what it is, generally, we always start with some form of a lab panel after we assess what the needs are. And, like other physicians that are in my type of field, we draw a much larger panel than the average physician generally does, looking at more things than just your cholesterol, your kidney, your liver, your red blood cells, and thyroid, and being deemed healthy, and out the door you go. Obviously, hormone replacement is a large part of our practice. That's kind of what we started on, was hormone replacement, testosterone replacement in men and women, estrogen replacement in females as well. But we've moved over into, which I believe is the future of functional and age management medicine, is peptide therapy. I truly believe that's the next wave of wellness medicine, is peptide therapy. And peptides are chained amino acids. We have thousands of peptides naturally occurring in our body, and scientists have been able to isolate these peptides, figure out what their function is, and then we're able to use them to augment those functions to improve on those functions as we age. And we have peptides that can tan the skin, peptides that can give you erections, peptides that can increase libido, peptides that can burn fat and increase muscle, peptides that help heal ligaments and tendons, and so on and so on. They're just amazing, amazing products. And so that's a large part of what we do. And then, also have our sexual function clinic, which we do a procedure called pulse wave, which is an approved device to increase blood flow to the penis. And we have very good success with that. It's non-invasive, vaginal rejuvenation in women. And then I have actually a personal training gym in the back, where we have a trainer here 5 days a week, training patients on what we believe is the most important thing, which is with fitness, which is your core. And I haven't even announced it yet. We've added Ozone Therapy to our practice in the last 2 weeks, which we're really excited to have Ozone as part of our practice.
What does that do?
So it's just ozone is O3 versus O2, which is oxygen, and it's a sauna that you sit in and basically steams onto the skin. And ozone has a great anti-inflammatory properties, you're always limited by what the FDA will allow you to say, but ozone itself, bacteria, viruses, things of that nature can't live in ozone. And so, in Europe and other places, it's used as antiviral, antimicrobial as well. we have to be careful what we say for here in the United States because of FDA approval. But many people use it for general wellness, increased energy, antimicrobial, antiviral, those sorts of things. So we're really excited to add that to our practice too. And then of course we have a whole array of cosmetics. We do all that as well in our practice. So we're constantly adding. Sometimes I wonder if we're adding too much, but we're constantly adding to the practice as new things come down the pike, and as my interests go, we add these different technologies to our practice. We pride ourselves always on trying to have the absolute best technology that we can have, and get the most training on that technology that we feel like we can have. Because I extensively train on all of these things. That I'm part of the mastermind course with peptides. There's only about 60 doctors in the world, I think, that are in the mastermind course, and we meet regularly to keep up on peptides and really train under the top industry leaders. So, we think technology is important to have the best technology, but also have the knowledge to go along with it. I think that's what separates us from some of our competitors out there.
So you're in Texas, and you're in Weatherford, and
right outside of Fort Worth.
Right. So the folks that you generally treat, are they in that area, or do you treat folks from all around?
So, obviously most of our patients, the majority of our patients are within probably a 30-mile radius. But we do have out-of-state patients as well. We have patients that have heard about us and will travel in to see us. And the greatness of modern medicine today is we can do so much of it just like we're doing today with this podcast. We can jump on, and luckily right now, the one good thing I guess with COVID is they've allowed us to use these platforms extensively with no HIPAA violations. So we're able to jump on a Zoom call or something of that nature, or even FaceTime, and handle a lot of these visits, because we can get blood drawn anywhere. We still like to do face-to-face visits at least once a year, so we can lay hands on, listen to heart, lungs, and take a look at you. But yeah, we do have out-of-state patients as well. Some of our patients relocate. They stick with us usually when they leave, referrals from other patients. But the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth, is certainly where I get the majority of my patients.
One thing that I've read one time, modern medicine was predominantly design and the what do they call them, the protocols that you address these diseases were pretty much man focused or male focused, and the truth is that the way that you would address a female situation is way different than you would a man. Tell us a bit about the insight that you apply in those evaluations.
Well, and I would probably even take it further. It's just there are no set protocols for that fit all. Everybody's an individual, and we need to look at them all differently. You have to, women have different emotional stresses and things that sometimes men don't have. Their physiology is different. So I think it's always just important that we look at every patient as a complete individual and what's going on in their life, because many times it's I always joke, but it's not only being a doctor, but it's being a counselor as well sometimes, and trying to learn what's really going on in their life, what's really giving them stress. I have my own doctor that does that with me, because just because I'm good at telling everybody else what to do doesn't mean I'm always necessarily good at doing it myself. And so I have to have an accountability partner too. So my physician has to keep me straight. And so I just think it's just really important that we look at each person as a complete individual and not just stick them in a cutting. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is the protocol system is just everybody just stuck in a protocol and down the path they go. And the truth is that'll work for a lot of patients, but it certainly won't work for all the patients. And you just have to make sure you're looking at them individually. And when things don't work, I always say protocols are great until people don't respond. And that's whenever you have to really practice medicine, to get involved and to say, okay, what's different about this patient? Why is this patient not feeling their results that I think they should? Because maybe the labs look better, but they're not feeling better. And that's where you just have to really dive into the just to everything of their life to figure out what's going on with them.
It's such a vulnerable feeling when you go see a physician for a challenge that you're having, and it's in the back of your mind, although you may not, what's in the back of your mind, you wouldn't write it down, but the concern is, are they really discerning what is wrong with me? Or are they so pressed for time to quickly get into the next appointment and only checking off the approved? We can only look in these corners, and
Yeah.
oftentimes they'll say, just keep what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. And you and I both go, really, do you know what I'm doing? Because I'm eating chicken fried steak, and
Right.
I'm that's what I'm doing, and you're saying keep doing what I'm doing when everything that we read and stuff says, you're probably not doing it right.
Well, my own health was the biggest reason that I changed my practice, but the second reason was because of, I'll never forget, it was actually President Obama, and I'm not here to bash President Obama, but he made a statement when Obamacare was about to come out, and he said every physician should be happy because they're going to get to see more patients now. And I've yet to meet very many physicians who are looking to see more patients unless they've just started their practice. When I started my family practice, we had about 20 minutes for each patient, which had been sunk down to about 12 minutes whenever I left traditional medicine. And as I tell my patients, there is just absolutely no chance that in 12 minutes I can truly get to the root of the problem, treat it, and you understand it, and get you out my door in 12 minutes. It's just not feasible. And that's one of the things I like by going to the cash pay model is I spend most of the time, my new patients, sometimes 2 hours, maybe longer. Sometimes we'll break it up in 2 or 3 visits, if, maybe an hour each time for 2 or 3 times until we can really feel like we've got everything laid out on the table, kind of like a deck of cards to know where to go with this. And you simply can't do that model in an insurance-based practice. You just simply can't. You won't make any money. You'll close. And so I think that my patients in the cash pay model, and I think they see the value in what they pay for what they get. And I think that's ultimately what we're all looking for with our money is, do we see the value, do we see the return on investment of our dollar? And if we do, then we feel like it's worth it. As I tell, we're in the capital of horses here. This is the cutting capital of the world, Parker County, where I'm at. And so sometimes when I'll get a patient in and maybe they think that the cost is too high or something of that nature, this typically always works out. I'll say, I'll look out the window, which truck is yours? Oh, it's that truck over there. Oh, that looks like an $80,000 truck with all the, add-ons. You'll spend money on your vehicle, but you won't spend money on yourself. And you have to kind of get out of that thought that your body's just going to hold up no matter what you do to it, because you don't have that feeling when it comes to a vehicle or a house. But some people have that vehicle with themselves, that we're invincible. We can treat our bodies poorly and expect it always to work in our favor, and it just doesn't work that way, as we know. At some point, it will bite us.
Yeah, there's not only that facing your mortality, but it's almost like you have to admit to yourself that I need some help, and I'm not who I see myself as, right? I
Sure.
think about, did you ever think about when you dream, what age do you see yourself in your dreams, right? And
We were just talking about this the other day. It's kind of like when you walk in the mirror and you look in the mirror real quick, and like, hang on, that guy looks a little older than I think he is. And so it's funny. We just had this discussion the other day. I didn't think of it that way in my dreams, but it's kind of like what you perceive yourself as. And then you maybe look at yourself and go, hey, who's that older guy showing up in the mirror now as we start to age? But, I just, like I said, I always just try to convince my patients that, we maintenance everything in our life, and we have to maintenance ourselves. We have to, I'm a typical guy. I love, my hobby is old cars. And so I always say, we got to rotate the tires, tune the engine up occasionally. We can't just expect to run the wheels off of it and everything to be okay. And once you can get a person past that step, then I think they start seeing the value in what we do. And very quickly, I think they start to see that we're, I'm an osteopathic physician, and one of the things I actually chose to be an osteopathic physician. And, we're always saying that, prevention does wonders. Instead of just, here's the pill to treat the symptom, but trying to get to the root cause of the problem. Like, one of my pet peeves is type 2 diabetes. Used to the protocol when I went to medical school, the first thing that was the treatment that physicians were supposed to institute for type 2 diabetes was nutrition, dietary counseling. actually teach a person that in many cases type 2 diabetes can be cured by simply losing weight, eating properly. I always joke a diabetic diet is nothing more than a healthy diet. And now when you look at that protocol, that's gone. So basically the American Diabetes Association has told the physicians, give up on nutritional counseling, just go straight to medicines. And I just think that a lot of times there are patients that we can really change their lives in those scenarios if we would just take the time and maybe give them the chance. But, you know, you have to find the right patients as well. Not everyone wants to truly change their life in a better way when it comes to life and fitness and health, you know, lifestyle.
Dr. Kris Kresser really talks about that it actually the diabetic situation or the diabetes situation is an impending event that's very significant for the health of our population, and yet there's simple ways to address it, to change the course that most of us are on. And we would be surprised at how many people in our population fit into that what is it that you call that designation, that you're in that state and are approaching a situation where you're going to have to address it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, I think that if you give a lot of those patients the chance to change their lives, they will. It's just in the traditional, I call it the traditional cattle chute of you know, family practice, internal medicine. You know, you're seeing 30, 40 patients a day, and you're so desensitized to this because you're so used to the average patient just, give me a pill, doc, give me a pill. And you know, and you just get into that mantra of just give me another medicine. And it kind of goes along with hormone replacement. As we always joke, you know, the 50-year-old lady comes in with new onset depression at 50, never had depression before, has no reason to be depressed other than she is depressed. In other words, no one died, there's no financial issues, marriage is good. No one bothers to look at her hormones. They just stick her on Lexapro or something of that nature. And one of the doctors I learned from used to say, or probably still does, says she didn't have a Lexapro deficiency. She had hormonal imbalance. And yeah, the Lexapro may cover up some symptoms and may make her depression better, but the side effects of the medication many times can be, over a 10-year span, can be quite severe. And so, you know, if you just would have gotten to the root cause of the problem, you could have treated that. And not only does the depression go away most of the time, but they feel tremendously better too. And their whole life gets better. And so, and you know, he goes to this whole cascade of pathway of how it just started with Lexapro, and 5 years later, you end up on 5 medicines because of the weight maybe you gained from the antidepressant, that caused high blood pressure, and then diabetes. And, you know, you take little Susie at 50 who was healthy, and at 60 she takes 6 medicines and her life is kind of out of order, and it was all just because she didn't get a functional look at her overall health and get it treated properly. I'm not trying to say that all traditional medicine is bad. I certainly use traditional medicine in my practice. I by no means am a 100% alternative medicine physician. Heck, I probably still lean heavier to traditional medicine than I do alternative medicine, but it's about blending those 2 practices into one for your patients and individualizing it for each patient, because some patients want all alternative medicine. Some patients want very little to none. It just depends on their beliefs. And as I always say, I'm here to educate. I'm not here to tell you what's right for you. I do not do that. I was just talking to a patient on Saturday night, and she got breast cancer 6 years ago and chose not to have any of chemotherapy or radiation. And, you know, at first I thought she was kind of crazy, to be honest with you. It was when I was kind of going into this, and she had a stage 1 cancer, and I'm like, why not just take care of it? Your cure rate is extremely high. And she said, I don't want to. And she's now 6-7 years out, has had no issues, and did all alternative treatments. So, you know, it's whatever, but she was educated. She made her own decision. She knew what the risks were. She knew what the possible benefits were, and that was right for her. So it's whatever's right for the patient. As long as they're educated in their decisions, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, most of the traditional medicine or general physicians, I don't think it's their intent to do that. I think it's the constraint of the system that they're
Sure.
trying to do their best in that doesn't
Hmm.
allow them probably the time. And I imagine it weighs on them or grinds on them over time. And it would be a courageous decision to become more of a alternative medicine or take the path that you've done. You're going to have to say no to a bunch of work. You're going to have to change up your whole practice. You're going to have to approach things from a non-insurance pay system. So that's a
Sure.
huge transformation.
Sure.
You went through
No
that. And
doubt.
yeah.
I talked to other physicians that are looking at doing this as well. And the good news is I did it earlier in my practice. I don't know if I was sitting here today at 48 years old that I would have the courage to do it now. And just like anyone, none of us want to take a step back financially or anything of that nature, but you have to look at it as a step back to move forward. It can be risky. The good news, though, is that more and more physicians are doing this. Physicians are leaving the traditional practice of medicine at an incredible rate because of burnout. And I totally agree with you that I doubt very few physicians are happy with the type of medicine they're practicing, but the constraints that's all it allows. You have to see this many patients. This common thought that physicians are just making millions of dollars and, living in their yachts, and it's just not the case. I mean, I have patients that make, way more money than I ever made in traditional medicine that, don't have near the education that physicians have. And I think that physicians do agree should be compensated for, going through medical school, residency, all the sacrifice that they've gone through. And so you'd be surprised at what a lot of physicians make. And to do that, they have to see 30 to 40 patients a day to even do that. I used to have a staff. I had two PAs, myself, and we had over 20 total employees. I now run a practice with 4 because when you cut out billing and insurance, you cut out so much of your practice. You just don't have to have that anymore. So I don't have to make nearly as much gross to make the net. And so it's just in my opinion, a much better way. And we really found a niche with, I'm very lucky that there's a lot of people in America, especially in my area, that are self-employed. They have insurance, but I call it catastrophic insurance. It only kicks in when they get to $5, $7, $8, $10,000, and they realize that if it's a normal year, they're not even going to come close to that, and they'd much rather pay me, $2,000 or $3,000 a year to know that they're going to get VIP type care and get much better care than what they were getting before. They just see the value in that. And it's a controlled cost for them. They're like, okay, my primary care needs are taken care of for this price, and they can budget it in and off they go. I've got all types of patients in my practice. I'm actually surprised sometimes the people that are willing to pay it, but they see the value in it. And I think that's important. And America's moving to more of a, I personally love concierge type services. Just to know that I'm being catered to a little bit is worth it to me. If I see the value in it, I'm willing to do it. And I think a lot of Americans are the same way.
Totally. You get spoiled. Sounds like to me, there was a point where you transitioned from seeing yourself as a doctor to seeing yourself more as a business person. And that was a big impact in your decision.
Yeah, and I'm still learning. I always joke that I feel like physicians start off their practice a step behind. Where most physicians have no type of business background. There's a few that maybe did some sort of business and then changed their career path, but most of us have no business background. Medical school has no business classes associated with us, which I think is a really big failure on their parts. I think if they just had the basics. I can't tell you how many times the first contract a physician signs, they sign a ridiculous contract that affects the next 5 to 10 years of their life because, they weren't good business people. They didn't get the lawyer to look at the contract. We're naturally trusting people. We're physicians. We want to help. We think everybody's there to help each other, and then you kind of get burned on that. And so I will admit I've made bad business decisions, and but we've learned from those things. And I think I'm at the point now where I'm a decent businessman. I don't consider myself great, but I think I'm getting better with each year that goes by. Certainly looking at things differently, and because there's medicine and there's business, and you have to merge the two together, but you have to, because as my wife would tell you, you know her, she's my office manager, you know, I want to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's do it all. It'll help my patients, but then you also have to look at it, is it financially feasible? Is it going to give something to my patients, but is it also going to let us keep our doors open? Because I'm no good to anybody if I can't keep my doors open. And so, you know, we've actually, even though we're adding things, we're downsizing at the same time, because I felt like my practice was getting a little bit bloated, if that makes sense. I do believe you can do too much. You can do so many things that the patient loses track of what you actually do. Maybe you as a provider lose track of what you actually do. Like, where is my focus? So I've kind of decided in my practice that I'd like to do 5, 6, 7, 8 things really, really well. And I'm okay with a guy down the street maybe doing something that I don't do that I like, and I can refer to them for that procedure or whatever, and just do what I do. And so I've tried to, I used to be nearly obsessed with what everyone else was doing, and I've kind of learned I don't care. It's what I'm doing, and people come to me for, you know, I believe for what I do, and I need to be strong in that conviction and just stick with what I feel strongly about, what I think helps my patients, what I want to actually do, because if I don't enjoy it, it's going to show in my practice, and I have to be enthusiastic about doing it as well. And so, because everything we do here, we do as well. You know, there's not a procedure here that if we recommend it that one of us or all of us haven't done on ourselves, because I have to be able to show you that I believe in it that much.
So do you consult other physicians who maybe are considering to move into the area you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always consulting with other physicians. It's not a huge network. I mean, we're talking about 20,000 physicians across the country, but you know, it really turns into a small networks of maybe 50 doctors or so. And when new doctors come out, I'm always willing to help someone get started in this business, because I think there's no way in my lifetime we're going to saturate the market with these type of physicians. And so I always try, and I try to help them learn from the mistakes that I made, because I would really hate for other physicians to make the same exact mistakes that I made. So I try to help with that. I actually just got hired on with BioT, which is, I was with them for years and had left them for a while, and I came back to them just now. They've hired me on to kind of do exactly that. I'm one of the 3 or 4 physicians that's going to be in charge of training all the physicians on peptide therapy, but also just helping kind of with practice management and mentorship, I guess is what you would say, of other providers that are coming into the system. So I actually really, really enjoy that. That's something that I could see myself one day doing a whole lot more, is more on the consulting side and the training side, because that is something I truly enjoy doing.
So speaking of business decisions, you had a business development challenge when we ran into each other. Kind of give us where were you then when we ran into each other?
So we were all over the place. Marketing wise, it has always been, thank God we're with you guys now, because we actually have a focus now, but marketing has always been the most difficult part of my practice. We're not trained as physicians how to market. We spent so much money going in circles. You know, you throw money at, you know, let's put it in this magazine, or let's do this billboard, or let's put this radio ad, but there was no consistency to anything. And we would work with this person and then that person, and there was never any real plan. It was just what kind of the flow was of that month. And my wife and I, Crisanta, we never could seem to get on the same page, because, you know, I was more into traditional marketing and she was more into probably where we should have been, but we never could seem to merge those thoughts. And then we had a patient that came in actually, and I've told you this before, I still think that her social media is some of the best I've ever seen, and they make custom ranch gates. But she does such a good job of keeping it interesting that it's still something I look at every single day to this day, years later, because I love what they do. And I sat down with her and talked to her about, how did you do all this? And that's when she turned me on to story branding, and I read the book. And then it really kind of hit home with me about what we were wanting to do with our practice. And then we were fortunate enough to find you guys. And, y'all really helped us not just figure out what to do today, but what to do next month, 6 months, a year from now, and put a real plan in action versus just swirling around in circles. And I'm the worst about wanting immediate results. And I know that's something you, my wife, Sam, everybody has taught me about. It is a slow burn. It builds. And we've started to really see that over the last 6 to 9 months. I mean, I despite COVID, I feel so good about where my practice is right now. And I think there's nothing that can stress the structure of my practice more than COVID could. And the fact that we're still, by no means am I about to retire, but to still be a profitable practice despite COVID, I think is just such a feather in our cap of where we're headed with this, and how patients, see how we can help them through COVID versus just, leaving us and, waiting till COVID passes. So, and I think the marketing has really helped us with that. And so the biggest, it's always a challenge working with your spouse. I wouldn't recommend it to most. I don't know if I'd recommend it to myself, but we're here, and I'm joking.
Yes,
but taking the marketing and putting it with you guys has eliminated the biggest negative factor that she and I had in our practice that we disagreed on.
Wow.
We never agreed on marketing. And, not only was it affecting our business, it was affecting our marriage. I'm not saying we're about to get divorced, but you take this stuff home when you work together. And we just never could get on the same page. And the nice thing now is it's just not even a discussion any longer. I feel good about the marketing. I'll pop in about every 2 weeks with Sam and ask what's going on. And I look at everything that I get, but I'm just always so pleased with it that it's just, it allows me to do what I want to do, which is see patients. No offense, man. I would rather not have to do anything with marketing. And that's about where I'm at now with this. They bring me in when I need to be. And then they I guess that's the easiest way to say it. They involve me when I need to be. Otherwise, I'm out of it, and I just get, updates weekly, and I think it's great. It really works well for us. I couldn't be happier with where we're at with marketing. And the one thing that I love working with you guys is y'all really, just like I do with patients, y'all understand that just because it works in Amarillo or just because it works in Denver doesn't mean it's going to work in Parker County. And that's the thing that just drove me crazy is you would get these large marketers and you'd have to do this. It works perfect in Dallas. Well, we're not Dallas. I mean, yes, we're 45 minutes from Dallas, but we're not Dallas. And anybody that lives here understands that. But when you don't live here, you don't understand it. And so that's just what I really love is how y'all really listen to us about what we thought. And when something doesn't work, then you're willing to say, hey, that didn't work. Let's try it this way. And I just really like that because none of us expect perfection. We just want to know, hey, that didn't work. What are we going to do now to make it work? And anyway, that's about what I would say about it overall.
I suspect that the reason that you gel with us is because we approach the business development challenge that you have and all the folks in your position have the same way that you would approach a patient that comes into you. You don't have a silver bullet. Here, take this and call me later. You go through a very a structured process. And really, your product is your process. And that's why it becomes impactful for everyone because it's different. The process allows you to be effective with a variety of patients.
Yeah, there's always certain things that work everywhere. Certain things that I can always recommend a good diet to everyone, and that's going to work pretty much universally. But then there's higher level things that you have to judge individually, and I feel like y'all truly do that. And that's, as I was saying, I'm like, that's exactly what it's exactly the same. It's just dealing with marketing versus dealing with medicine. But the theory is the same. Really get to know where the issues are. What can we do to help? And then let's get a real plan put together that will fix this and get it moving in the right direction. And and what I also like is you guys do a good job of quantifying it so that you can see that, okay, I'm spending blank and it's returning blank. Okay, it's worth it. Versus back in the days where I would just throw money at something and you had no clue if it brought you business, if it didn't bring you business. And so, I still don't understand how it all works. I always joke that all these metrics and things, I always joke, I trust you guys and I just don't understand it. But that's why I do what I do and you do what you do. And it's a matter of aligning yourself with good people that can plug your gaps and, that you can trust to do the job that you need them to do.
I think your secret weapon, the part that a lot of other teams that we work with, is your wife, Crescenta. She's
Mm-hmm.
she's really the anchor here, and she's always, she does the things or helps support us so we can do our job better, but she's able to manage you, to go get you
Sure.
and get your input, but she can also
Mm-hmm.
handle all. That's the beautiful thing, and I think that's one of the reasons I would definitely credit. Yeah, we have a great team, but on your side, your wife is probably one of the most important reasons why our engagement has been so successful.
Sure, I always joke she's much more important than she thinks she is sometimes, and because she is my biggest supporter, and I always say, heck, I'm the same way. And it's not always rosy working with your spouses, and vice versa. I know she would say the same thing, but we've kind of found our niche. And my practice, it's amazing when she's. I feel bad for her because I never give her any time off, because when she's just not here, I have great staff. They're awesome. It's not meant to be a negative for them, but she just keeps everything flowing. And we are a smaller community, and my patients come here just as much to see her as they come to see me. And so sometimes I'm busy and she'll go in the room and just, visit with them for 30 minutes. And it means a lot. I think really means a lot to my patients to get, heck, they know my kids. My kids are up here running around a lot of the time, and my patients have seen my kids grow up. And I've been very, very lucky, because when I left traditional medicine, a nice probably 10% of my practice followed me. But those 10% are really dedicated to me. They've been with me for 20 years, a lot of them. And so I'm just very, very lucky. And, I feel like I truly know my patients, who they are, what makes them tick, what's good, what's bad. We all have it. And so when you can know a patient like that, you can really get down to the core of how to help them. Like I said, we're part counselor as well as physicians. I always say physician / wedding counselor, marriage counselor / whatever. We just try to, and if we don't know it, we try to involve people in our practice that can do it even better than we can. So, but yeah, absolutely. She's a big important part of our practice.
Totally agree. So what's the one question you wish every patient would ask you when they come in to see you, but they don't?
Well, I always say the one thing that I wish I could get out of my patients is simply compliance. The biggest thing that kills a plan is non-compliance. And as I always tell my patients, and I tell every new patient this, I won't get mad at me if you tell me you're not going to do it, but just please tell me now, so that I don't waste my time going down for an hour down this path and you have no intentions of ever doing it. Tell me, doc, that's too much. I won't do that. The one question, probably just overall what my feelings are on general health and what's the one most important thing that they can do for their own health. And I still go back to mom had it right. We are what we eat. And I still believe that if patients ask me, I will only do one thing. I don't care what it costs, but I'll only do one thing. It's always nutrition. I tell my patients before hormones, peptides, exercise, anything, eat right. And if we can just make small changes in our diet, we can make huge gains down the road. So I've always felt like nutrition is, and I'm by no means a perfect nutrition person, but I think I do better than the average American. And sometimes I do even better than others, but nutrition is important for our general health.
Wow, all those things that you share there apply to a perfect engagement with us as well. It's interesting how similar the process is. So let's say I happen to be a physician that I'm listening to this podcast, and it's been in the back of my head, how can I transition my practice to be more relevant, or at least give me some more legs later, because at the rate I'm going, I'm probably going to burn out. I'm having a very stressful life. I'm having to see all these patients. How would someone
Mhm.
maybe reach out to you, connect with you to just have a conversation to see what that might look like, a different.
Well, any potential clients or physicians, providers are always willing to shoot me an email at Dr. Kris at theresurgeclinic.com, which is DRKRIS at theresurgeclinic.com. I'll be glad to respond. I usually respond within a day. And, you know, whether it's a potential client or a physician provider of any sort that just has questions. You know, that question as far as like how to transition is different for every provider.
Mm-hmm.
I have a physician friend that recently, he basically shut his practice down and has completely shunted his whole practice over to age management medicine. He's been lucky enough to have some successful ventures that he's financially able to do that. Most providers can't. I was not able to do it that way. So I had a slow turnover process into going from traditional to cash pay practice that I can discuss with different providers of how to do. But I guess it goes back to what we're saying. It just really depends on what they have going on and how young are they, how old are they, how much time do we have to kind of make this transition, what kind of commitments does a person have. Can you take a step back for a couple of years? Because you will. Financially, you will take a step back most likely for a couple of years, but then you can, you know, make it back and have such a better lifestyle once you're self-pay or cash practice.
Great. And if we're a potential patient, or where maybe we weren't aware of this way to approach medicine for us in a process, they would connect with you the same way, correct?
Yeah, or they can simply go through our website, you know, theresurgeclinic.com, and we certainly have where you can put in your information, and it'll go to one of my staff members, and somebody usually gets back within just a few hours. They're welcome to email me as well, like I said, at Dr. Kris with a K at theresurgeclinic.com, and we'll answer any questions that we can have. If we need to have a phone consultation, we can do that as well. I'm very lucky. My staff is well versed in what we do, so most of the times my staff is able to answer all the questions for potential clients that they might need and how to get started with us.
Okay. You've been a great guest, Kris, Dr. Kris, yes. And I appreciate and value you for being on the ROI Online Podcast.
Well, thanks for your time as well, Steve. I really did enjoy it and looking forward to all of our work together in the future.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kris. And that's a wrap.